Hey y'all, welcome back to another January solo as we're kicking off this new year. We're going to talk about failure and fatigue today. As we get started, I want you to think about a time when you were in the middle of something that felt catastrophic in the moment. You just felt terribly about where you were at, only to find out that later on you could clearly see this was the path you were meant to follow, or maybe where you ended up was so much better than where you were. Grab onto a time like that in your life and think about that. I feel that way about my fairway story and where I am today in my career. I'm going to share part of that story with you today and some lessons that I've learned along the way, 3 lessons in particular. Number 1, there's always a decision to make. Always. A next decision that can be the next right decision. So oftentimes we beat ourselves up about having made the wrong decision, or we worry about taking the next step because, oh my goodness, what if I do this and it's wrong? And we can get caught up in that. But the beautiful thing, the lesson in this story of looking back at, hey, it is better. It's so much better, is that there's always a next right decision to make. You can get there. Second thing, every failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. It's an opportunity. Not everybody learns from their mistakes, from failures, because that opportunity word requires us to actually pay attention and look at, what did I learn here? How do I need to grow in order to not repeat the same mistake? And or, maybe it wasn't something that was preventable by you, but hey, you learned something from it anyway. You have to actually look at it and try to figure out what the lesson is. The third thing, which is the most important thing in my opinion, is God is always up to something good for you, even when we don't feel it, we don't see it, we don't understand it. He is working for your good. I want to take a step back in time to the origin story of Discovering W.I.S.E. And if you've listened to it, you know that I was at a live coaching event and Discovering W.I.S.E. was birthed that day while we were in a session where Dr. Henry Cloud was speaking. I left that session and I texted my coach and told him that I thought I had just quit my day job. Fast forward a couple of months, some thoughtful planning, and I did just that. I left a company that I had spent 10 years fully immersed in growing, developing, and building a team and mortgage practice in order to go coach full time. Because I believed that was what I was being called into, and I had an absolute passion, still do, around coaching. I turned my business over to my production partner, turned my management over to another of my managers, and I stepped into a new industry with a brand new company that was just in its infancy, directly into the unknown, right? I earnestly believe that I never would have left the company that I was at if it weren't for the fact that I was leaving the industry entirely. I probably would still be there today for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is because I just didn't know any different. I was a loyal, committed teammate, and I didn't ever consider moving until that day. While I'd been in the business for 10 years prior to my move to that company, it was the place where I really grew up in the business. It was what I knew. I suppose that identifies another lesson that I learned, which is just because you're comfortable with it doesn't mean that it's what's best for you or maybe even good for you at all. So while I was going through this process, though, I met with a very good friend of mine, and we were working through the transition. He was asking me some questions, and he was a real estate agent that I worked with, and I remember him being so incredibly supportive. He said to me, "Carrie G, that's what I love about you. You just go for it. You jump and you build your wings on the way down." And he was shaking his head and laughing and asked me how he could help. Well, guys, I may have been a little more confident in myself in making the decision than I was as I continued to venture further in. I had just quit my almost 20-year career at that point and said, okay, I'm going all in over here. And I was committed to making it work. My husband and I got together and talked about what would it look like if I had no income for a time. We had savings set aside for that. We had a plan that would span a year and said, all right, this is what we're going to do. And he was fully supportive of me, and I was going for it, right? I had this plan. Well, you know what they say about our plans, right? I was so fortunate to coach a great group of people, and I will be forever grateful for their trust and support as I was building this new business. I'll also be forever grateful for all that I learned in what ended up being a 9-month intensive growth experience as a coach, as a leader, and frankly, just as a human being. One of the clients that I coached was the owner of a local title company, and throughout the whole of our coaching relationship, he'd been asking me to join his team in some leadership capacity. I kept telling him no until I had gotten to the place where our savings and my income and his offer was one that I couldn't turn down. We had gone through the vast majority of our liquid savings that we had set aside in that plan that we laid out. And I was in a place where I needed some more consistent income. Now, I was making an okay living, right? Like, it wasn't like we were destitute or anything, but I was watching the balance in my savings account go down, and the income wasn't going up as rapidly as the balance in that savings account was going down. So this was a great opportunity to work with people that I loved and he agreed to continue to let me build my coaching business while I came in and operated as his interim CEO. He was working on some other transitional things, and in the meantime, I was able to still focus on growing my practice. Now, most people would say, well, okay, so you took a CEO job. Why did you feel like you failed? Well, there's a funny thing about that. I did. I absolutely felt like accepting this position was a mark of failure for me. Like, I just wasn't able to make it work in the coaching realm. And I felt like I was giving up on a dream. I felt like I was giving up on a calling in order to do this role. I couldn't obviously make near as much money as I imagined I could in coaching, and I felt like I overestimated myself at that time. I didn't know what I know today. Then I was in the middle of the madness and the mess, and I needed to be in a position where I could support our family and our life goals financially. But all that kept playing in my head, I will never forget. It just kept saying failure, failure, failure. You just failed, Carrie, right? Well, I've got to say, next decision, next decision, next decision today. During that same season, our son became very ill, and I was trying to work with him and the doctors on solutions for him. And I want to bring you back to that. Remember I said 9 months of intense learning and growing? Well, a lot of my study was around how our mind works, neuroscience, and researching things like how we make decisions, what drives action, thinking about our thinking, common disorders, depression, anxiety, and the like. Keep in mind, I never studied any kind of psychology before. I mean, I may have read a few books on the matter, certainly self-help stuff, but this was really like college level intensive study so that I could work in this coaching realm effectively in helping people. Well, what was once a foreign language to me, I sat in a doctor's office in the hospital listening to a psychiatrist, and I was able to not only understand, but actually then go do more research on how it was I could help our son. If I go back to lesson number 3, God is always working for our good. I thank Him for that time of study and learning and growing so that I could understand what was going on with my son and be his advocate in that situation. I don't doubt for a minute that that was part of the plan. Well, so the interim season as a CEO was coming to a close, and I needed to make my next decision. Should I stay there and head down the co-ownership path, or should I go? And what was the next move for me? I knew I loved coaching, and I knew I had zero interest in giving it up. None. I didn't want to go back into mortgage because for me, at that point, it would be further evidence of my failure. Plus, I wasn't a big fan, frankly, of any local mortgage companies, and I wasn't going to go back to where I had left because of how some things got handled in my departure. So enter in my mother and my coach. Last week's episode was about your own personal leadership team. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, head on back and listen to that. But these two, my mother and my coach, have been on my personal leadership team for a very long time. And it was time for me to listen to them and hear what they had to say in terms of speaking into my life. And it was hard. It wasn't easy stuff to listen to for me. And frankly, I had to get out of my own way. I had 20 years worth of mortgage lending experience. I had connections, background, expertise, and it was valuable. Basically, I needed to get over myself and move forward. I didn't need to give up coaching. I could do both. I could keep my practice and go back and originate as much as it has worked for me, based on where I wanted to be in my life. I got to choose. I got to make that next decision. So my mother had been at Fairway for years, and she had known the CEO since she started in the industry 3 decades prior. She was retiring, and she suggested that I check out Fairway. She still tells me to this day, I never had a bad day at Fairway, ever. My coach told me that it would be a great fit for me. He was very familiar with the company, and he said, Carrie, absolutely, it's a fit for you. Since I had been in the recruiter's chair for years and was part of all the dog and pony shows, I didn't want to entertain all of that stuff. I considered it all smoke and mirrors. So I just asked for a couple things, asked a couple of questions, and said, hey, I just want to come do good business. We're going to do it honestly and ethically. And as long as you can provide these things, we're good. And they said, yep. And we moved forward. So I got back into the swing of things, and in no time was rebuilding my team and connecting to those at Fairway and feeling at home. There was a particular day where I had this bizarre revelation that I had done a fair amount of business that month, and that I didn't need to fight with anyone in order to get it done. It just was easy. It really wasn't difficult to do volume like I had done before. And the difference was that before, I had to fight all the time. You see, I had become so accustomed to fighting to get things done that it just became part of my day, part of what I did. I didn't even realize until then that I'd been freed from it. Fast forward to a Fairway meeting that year where I ran into an old friend from my prior company. It was so wonderful to be welcomed by him and with open arms and laughter, and we just reconnected instantly. And I had been hearing about an internal coaching program, and I knew that he was a part of that, so I asked him about it. The next thing you know, I get the absolute gift of helping to build and coach within Fairway's internal coaching program. I think that's what they call full circle, right? So the failure that was so terrible, what I thought was giving up on my dream, was all working together to prepare me for this time, for this place, for the best that God had planned for me. I get to every day go to work with an amazing company that I am 100% all in for, and I get to help coach and mentor others throughout the nation. Hello, pinch me. I also get the blessing of being able to say that my mom was right after all. Most moms are, just saying. Steve Jacobson, the CEO of Fairway Mortgage, lives out the core values of Fairway daily, and he leads this company in a way that I am blessed to be a part of, with humility, courage, putting people and service to others first. Another praise God. You see, God is the waymaker. When we don't see a way, he does. When we don't understand, he will show us the steps. We have to be willing to humble ourselves before him and let him lead. Isaiah 43:15 through 16 says, I am the Lord, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. Thus says the Lord, who makes a way through the sea and a path through the mighty waters. In this story, you find that the Israelites were feeling hopeless. God was reminding them of the past. I think this is so relevant to us today. Go back to that first question that I asked you. How many times have we experienced his favor, his blessings, his freedom, only to find ourselves back in a state where we try to push through on our own might instead of remembering that he is the great I am, not us. See, back in Exodus, God parted the sea. He made a way where there wasn't one. I absolutely love the song Waymaker. I feel like we all need to be reminded of this. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. He doesn't stop, friends. Whether it's your relationship with a significant other, your children, your career, your health, bring it to him and trust that he can and will provide. Whatever battle it is that you're fighting today, you are never alone. And hey, make note of those times when you can clearly see that he's shown up. The next storm, it may help you navigate with greater confidence and strength in him. I'll talk to you soon.